Neovim 0.12 just released, but what is there actually that grabs your attention more than the other changes? You might have noticed that from plugin management to LSP setup, a few core workflows and tooling start to feel more built-in Neovim rather than depending on external tooling and plugins. And in this video, I'm going to break down some of the changes that caught my own attention and share it with you. So the first thing is vim.pack, the Neovim's recent built-in plugin manager, which ships with Neovim 0.12 directly now without requiring any more installation and configurations. The API is minimal. It just has 3 functions: add, update, and delete. You could add a single GitHub like URL or a list of them, or I don't know, other repositories, like other remote repositories, that is. And it will generate you a log file to keep track of the commit hashes and the versions of each plugin, so you can reproduce it in different setups. The question now is that if you're already using something like lazy.nvim, right, the lazy package manager, which is, very much famous in the Neovim community, what is the difference? Obviously, the biggest difference is lazy loading itself. Lazy.nvim can defer loading a plugin until you actually need it, such as like a certain file type is opened or you hit a certain keybind and a certain event happens basically inside your Neovim session. And when that happens, it loads the plugin in a lazy manner, right? In vim.pack, you don't have lazy loading. You could try and imitate it through auto commands and some other like configurations, but it's not built in a similar fashion that lazy.nvim allows you to do. So if you're gonna have a large config and it is important for you to have a fast startup time, you might as well hold off from using vim.pack. But on the other hand, if your configuration is small and you are maybe a Vim purist or don't like using plugins so much, well, vim.pack is there now for you to use. It's also noteworthy to say that it's marked experimental in documentation, but it is stable enough for daily use. And yeah, I would assume and speculate that in future they would be adding more features to it. And I think this is just a baseline. Okay, so the next change is related to the LSP functionalities now, which, I mean, it has always existed in Neovim to some extent, at least from, I think, 0.5, Neovim version 0.5 onwards, but now they've even done some more changes to it and made it more streamlined, I would say. So usually your setup needed nvim LSP config to get server definitions, right? And you would have to manually use unattached callbacks and juggling capability tables and a lot of boilerplate basically for every single language server you want to have inside your Neovim. So in 0.11 they've started to clean this up a bit, and in 0.12 they've pushed it further. The model now is pretty straightforward. You drop a config file for each language server into an LSP directory and call vim LSP enable with a lot of server names, and that's mostly it. The core setup can be literally just one call with a list of servers, and each server gets its own config file with whatever specific settings you need. There's also a new LSP command in the command line like this, where it replaces LSP start, LSP stop, and LSP restart, which were used in previous versions. So like you could do LSP enable or restart here. Previously you had to do LSP restart or start and stop like as single commands. On top of that, there are new LSP capabilities added in this release, things like inline completion, document colors, workspace diagnostics, and a lot of other stuff that you could probably refer to in the release notes of Neovim 0.12. Now, nvim LSP config is still relevant. You probably would need that plugin because it ships ready-made server definitions that Neovim can consume. So most people, including me, would still want to use it. But the amount of configuration to do it and get it up and running is now significantly reduced. And you just basically need the configuration files of LSP config to be used. You don't need to require LSP config yourself anymore. Okay, the third change is with native autocompletion. So Neovim has always had some built-in completion in the underlying implementation, but you always had to do some manual work, and you had to press Control X, Control O to trigger it, and nothing would show up on its own as you type, similar to how you would get that experience in IDEs or VS Code, for example. And you had to mostly rely on nvim-cmp or blink.cmp, right? In 0.12, there's a new autocomplete option that changes it. So you basically have to set vim.o.autocomplete equals true. And suggestions will start appearing in insert mode as you type, without you having to trigger anything manually. So that's the biggest change they've made. There are also a lot of smaller and related changes, like the complete option, which controls what sources Neovim pulls suggestions from and can call arbitrary functions. So plugins can register themselves as completion sources using a standard interface, rather than having to implement a whole LSP server just to provide completions. That's more of an ecosystem level change, but it's worth noting about. And there's a nearest flag for complete options that source suggestions by how close they are to your cursor in the file, which is a nice quality of life addition. Now, again, the question rises that would this replace something like blink.cmp? Probably, again, not yet for most people. If you want much more configurations and features with your auto completion setup, this native completion won't have it. I think it doesn't have hover documentation alongside suggestions yet, and it's something probably most people would rely on as a software engineer and programmer. And the feature set right now is more limited, but again, it's more streamlined than before, and it's a good baseline for simpler setups if you, again, don't want to use external plugins so much. Next up is UI2, and this is a bit different from the other things we've covered because it's not really a new feature you add to your workflow. It's more of a redesign of something that already existed, and it's basically a UI overhaul. And if you've used Neovim for any amount of time, there are these command line executions that creates a please enter this to continue blocking messages. For example, if you do an S, you would get such a message, and then you have to press enter again to continue. And there is syntax highlighting inside the command line, and there's apparently also changes with the pager where you could have the pager being open as an actual buffer to navigate in and search through it, for example. If I want to just quickly demonstrate the changes, let me run this command. And let's see, for example, the previous command, you can now see that there is syntax highlighting. And if I do this, you don't get the please press enter to continue message, and you could just continue without having to worry about those blocking messages anymore. Last but not least, we have cool built-in tools now with native, with Neovim natively providing support for them, and you don't have to install external packages anymore. First one is the UndoTree. So Neovim has always had a powerful undo system internally, and the history isn't linear, as you probably would know already. It's a tree, and you could undo several steps and then make a change. Those previous future states won't disappear, they branch off. And the problem is navigating through them in a sane way, right, without making things awkward and difficult. And there's this popular plugin called UndoTree.nvim on GitHub, specifically made for this. Now, the thing is that with Neovim 0.12, you could have it enabled or added natively, and you don't have to rely on external packages. It's not UndoTree and also DiffTool are not enabled by default, but if you do pack at nvim UndoTree, you would just essentially enable it, and then you could start using it. The second one is, as I mentioned, DiffTool. So Again, Neovim has internal support for diff and for comparing files side by side, but what's now new here is the directory level comparison, and you could basically like run DiffTool to compare directories and show the changes between them and not just singular files. Again, this is also not enabled by default, and you have to first add it using this command. Alright folks, that was it for today. I did a quick tour of some of the changes in Neovim 0.12 which I thought were noteworthy. Some are small, some are larger, and some might, I don't know, change how you configure or set up your Neovim system going forward. Let me know what you think and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching.